Have you ever noticed how some wounds stay with us, even when we think we've left them behind? They're like quiet echoes, calling out to us in the stillness of the night or in the pause between heartbeats. Today, I want to invite you into a story about those wounds, not to dwell on the pain, but to see how they can become doorways to something greater. I remember my grandmother telling me once, "The hardest parts of your story aren't there to stop you. They're there to show you who you really are." At the time, I didn't understand. I thought wounds were just that, things to hide, to bury, to forget. But as the years passed, I began to see what she meant. Sometimes, the very places we hurt the most are the places where light can finally get in. Archangel Michael's message today is gentle, but it's also urgent. He says that what you've carried for so long, the wound you thought would never heal, is now becoming the doorway to your greatest healing. That pain you've kept locked away isn't just a scar, it's a threshold. And on the other side of it is the peace and purpose you've been searching for all along. So, as we begin this journey together, I invite you to take a deep breath, to let go of the need to be perfect or to have all the answers. Because what's waiting for you isn't about perfection. It's about the quiet courage to trust that even your oldest wound can become the start of something new. Let's begin. It's a tender thing, isn't it? The way an old wound can stay alive in us long after the moment it happened. It might be a memory that flashes across your mind when you're least expecting it, or a familiar ache in your chest that seems to echo even in the happiest moments. These quiet reminders don't mean you're broken. They mean there's a story still waiting to be honored. I think of my neighbor, Paul, who lost his father when he was just a teenager. For years, he carried that wound like a stone in his pocket, heavy, but always there. I thought I'd moved on, he told me once. But every time I saw a father and son together, it was like the wound opened all over again. It wasn't until Paul started volunteering at a local youth center that he realized that his pain was more than just a scar. It was a guide. Working with young men who'd never had a father figure, he found a kind of healing he didn't expect. I realized that what I'd lost wasn't the end of my story, he said. It was the beginning of how I could show up for someone else. Paul's experience taught me that wounds aren't meant to be hidden away. They're meant to be transformed. The lesson here is gentle but important. Your old wound doesn't define you, but it can become the very thing that leads you to your purpose. As we keep moving forward, let's talk about how the very place that once felt like your greatest weakness can be the place where Archangel Michael's message of healing begins to take root. There's a quiet magic in realizing that the wound you've carried for so long isn't just a mark of what hurt you. It's also a hidden doorway, a threshold you couldn't see until the light finally touched it. Archangel Michael's message today is that what you thought was only pain is actually an invitation, an opening to a new chapter, one that's been waiting patiently for you to be ready. I think of a woman I met named Diane. For years, she carried the pain of a marriage that ended in betrayal. She told me how she would catch herself, replaying those final arguments in her mind, wondering what she could have done differently. It felt like that door was slammed shut, she said. I thought I'd never trust myself again. But one evening, she decided to paint something she'd loved as a child, but had set aside for decades. It was just me and the colors, she said. No expectations, no judgment. As she painted, she realized she wasn't just filling a canvas. She was letting herself feel again. That small act became a practice of healing, one brushstroke at a time. Diane's story is a gentle reminder. The doorway to your healing doesn't always look like a grand revelation. Sometimes it's as simple as allowing yourself to be curious again, to create without fear, to breathe into the spaces you once thought were closed forever. The lesson here is to trust that when Archangel Michael says your wound is a doorway, he means that every time you've felt broken, you were actually being prepared to step through to something bigger and more beautiful. As we keep going, let's explore how to listen to the quiet signs around you, the subtle hints that healing is already finding its way back to you. Have you ever noticed how the body remembers what the mind tries to forget? Long after we've decided to move on, our shoulders still tense, our breath still catches in those quiet moments when an old memory stirs. These aren't just echoes of the past. They're gentle signals that your spirit is still holding on to something that needs to be released. I remember my Uncle Richard, a quiet man who spent years working with his hands, building and fixing whatever needed tending in his small town. But no matter how many things he fixed, there was one thing he never seemed to heal: the ache in his chest whenever he thought about the father who had walked away when he was just a boy. For years, Richard carried that pain like a hidden weight. He never spoke of it, but you could see it in the way he'd sigh when he watched fathers and sons together. It wasn't until he started going for long walks in the early morning, breathing deeply of the fresh air, that he began to notice how his body would relax in the quiet. I realized I'd been holding my breath for decades, he said. Like if I didn't let it out, it couldn't hurt me anymore. Those early morning walks became his way of letting go, each breath a gentle permission to release what had been locked inside for too long. Richard's story is a tender reminder that healing doesn't always begin in the mind. It often begins in the body. The lesson here is to listen to those small signals, the tightness in your chest, the ache in your back, the tears that come without warning, because those are the whispers of the divine, telling you that the old wound is ready to become a doorway. As we move forward, let's talk about why it's so important to stop denying the hurt we carry, and how that simple act of acknowledgement can open the floodgates to healing. It's a habit we've all learned, in one way or another, to push away the pain, to put on a brave face and tell the world, I'm fine. But the truth is, pretending something doesn't hurt doesn't make it go away. It only buries it deeper. And the longer it stays hidden, the harder it is for healing to reach it. I think of my friend Margaret, who spent years telling everyone she was over the betrayal of an old friend. It was so long ago. She'd say with a smile, "It doesn't matter anymore." But at night, when the world was quiet, she'd still feel that tightness in her chest, that restless ache that reminded her she hadn't really let it go. One evening, after a long walk by the lake, Margaret decided to write a letter, not to send, but to speak the words she'd been too afraid to say. She wrote about the hurt, the disappointment, and the deep sadness that had followed her all those years. "I didn't even realize how much I'd been carrying," she told me later. "But the moment I admitted it, I felt like I could finally breathe." Margaret's story taught me something so important. Denial is like a dam. It keeps everything locked away, but it also keeps out the fresh, flowing water of healing. The lesson here is that it's not weakness to admit what still hurts. It's the first step toward letting the healing flow. As we keep moving forward, let's talk about how sometimes the old wounds we carry aren't just ours. They're part of a story that began long before we were born. And understanding that can be the key to unlocking the deepest healing of all. It's easy to forget that the pain we feel doesn't always start with us. Sometimes it comes from generations before, old patterns of silence, of shame, of carrying burdens that weren't meant to be ours alone. These are the wounds we inherit without even knowing it, the ones that live in the spaces between our memories and the stories we've been told. I think of a woman named Joanne, who always felt like she was carrying more than her share of the world's weight. "I never understood why I was always so afraid to trust," she told me. "Even when nothing bad was happening, I felt like I had to be on guard." It wasn't until she started looking back at her family's story that she realized her grandmother had been left alone with 6 children, and her mother had grown up learning to survive in a world that didn't always feel safe. Joanne saw that the fear she carried wasn't just her own. It was a thread that had been woven into her family's story long before she was born. And when she finally faced it, when she let herself grieve, not just for herself, but for the women who came before her, something shifted. It was like a weight I'd been carrying without even knowing, she said, and letting it go felt like opening a window I didn't know was there. The lesson here is this: healing isn't just for you, it's for everyone whose story lives in your bones. When you let the healing flow, you're not just freeing yourself, you're freeing the generations that came before and the ones still to come. As we move forward, let's talk about how the simple act of surrender, of letting go of what no longer serves you, can open the floodgates to the kind of healing that changes everything. Surrender is one of the most difficult lessons we can learn, especially when it feels like we're giving up something precious. But surrender isn't about defeat. It's about making space. It's about loosening our grip on pain and fear so that healing can flow in, gently and steadily. I remember my friend Samuel, who struggled for years with bitterness, After losing a lifelong friendship, he held on to the anger tightly, convinced that if he let go, he'd be admitting defeat. But one day, after a long conversation with his daughter, he decided to try something new. Instead of fighting the pain, he invited it in, acknowledged it with honesty and tenderness. Slowly, Samuel began to feel lighter. He started taking walks, spending time in nature, and allowing himself moments of peace without guilt. It felt strange at first, he said, like stepping into a new kind of freedom. And over time, that freedom grew. His heart opened to new friendships and new joys he hadn't thought possible. Samuel's journey teaches us that surrender is not about giving up on ourselves, but about trusting the process of healing. It's about saying, I'm ready to let go of what holds me back, so I can step into what's waiting for me. As we continue, we'll explore how even the deepest wounds can become the gateway to grace if we have the courage to surrender and let the healing flow. Sometimes, the very pain we dread can become the unexpected gift that leads us to new beginnings. Betrayal, loss, or disappointment may feel like a dead end, but often they are the universe's way of nudging us toward a different path, one that holds deeper healing and greater purpose. I recall a woman named Linda who was blindsided when a business partner she trusted betrayed her. For years, she felt stuck in the shadow of that heartbreak, unsure if she could ever rebuild. But slowly, Linda began to see that the betrayal had freed her from a situation that no longer served her. With the support of friends and a renewed faith, she started a new venture, one that reflected her true passions and values. Her story is a powerful reminder that sometimes what seems like the worst thing can be the very door to the best thing. Pain, when embraced and understood, can become the catalyst for transformation. The lesson here is this: don't fear the wounds that feel like endings. They may be the key to your next chapter. Archangel Michael's message is clear. Your old wounds are not your chains, they are your doorways. As we move forward, let's discover how breaking free from these hidden chains can open the way to the healing and miracles you deserve. Sometimes the heaviest chains we wear are the ones we don't see, the doubts, fears, and limiting beliefs that quietly hold us back from stepping into the fullness of our healing. These inner curses can keep us trapped, convincing us that we're not worthy of peace or abundance. I think of my friend Joan, who for years believed she wasn't capable of starting over after a difficult divorce. She told me, I thought my best days were behind me, that I had no power to change my story. That mindset kept her stuck in a cycle of worry and regret, unable to see the doors that were quietly opening around her. But when Joan began to challenge those beliefs, even in small ways, everything started to shift. She enrolled in a community class, reached out to old friends, and slowly began to rebuild her confidence. The chains that once held her began to fall away, replaced by a growing sense of hope and possibility. Joan's journey reminds us that the first step to healing is often breaking free from the stories we tell ourselves. The lesson here is clear. Archangel Michael's message is not just about external healing, but about freeing your heart from the invisible barriers that keep you from receiving it. As we continue, we'll explore how paying attention to the signs, the subtle whispers, and gentle nudges can guide you through this transformation, leading you toward the doorway of true healing. Life often speaks in whispers rather than shouts. Those small, quiet signs, the repeated numbers on a clock, a song that plays just when you need it, or a fleeting feeling that you can't explain, are often the ways the universe reaches out to remind you that you're not alone. I think of my friend Helen, who for weeks kept noticing the number 222 wherever she went, on receipts, on license plates, even on the pages of a book she picked up randomly. At first, she thought it was just coincidence, but as the signs continued, she started to feel a quiet reassurance, like someone was gently guiding her steps. Soon after, Helen found herself at a crossroads, facing a decision about a new opportunity. She said, "I wasn't sure if I should take the leap, but seeing those signs made me feel like I had permission from somewhere higher to trust my path." And when she embraced that trust, doors began to open in ways she never expected. Helen's story is a beautiful reminder that the smallest signs can carry the greatest messages. The lesson here is to stay open and curious. Don't dismiss those little nudges as random. They're the language of the divine, encouraging you to move forward. As we move on, let's explore how these quiet confirmations are part of a larger story, one that is leading you toward healing and the unfolding of your true destiny. Blessings often come softly, not with grand announcements or loud celebrations, but as a steady, gentle overflow that fills the quiet spaces in our lives. This kind of abundance doesn't always make headlines, but it carries a deep, lasting peace that touches everything around it. I remember my Uncle John, a man who never sought attention or praise. He worked quietly as a mechanic, always focused on doing his job well and helping others when he could. In his later years, neighbors would often bring him small gifts or offer their gratitude, not for anything flashy, but for the kindness and reliability he showed every day. John's quiet life was rich in ways money couldn't measure. His story reminds us that true blessings often come in the form of connection, respect, and the simple knowledge that we've made a difference. The lesson here is that the divine doesn't need to shout to show its presence. Sometimes, the softest overflows are the most profound. As we prepare to close this journey together, remember that your healing and your blessings may come quietly, but their impact will resonate deeply. In the final part, we'll reflect on how your name, spoken in heaven, is the key to stepping fully into the new life waiting for you. As we come to the end of this journey, I want to remind you of a truth that's both simple and profound. Your name has already been spoken in heaven. Long before you saw the signs or felt the call, your life was written into a greater story, a story of hope, healing, and new beginnings. I think of my friend Grace, who spent years feeling invisible and uncertain about her purpose. One evening, as she sat quietly reflecting, she felt a peace wash over her, unlike anything she'd known before. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a soft, steady reassurance that she was exactly where she needed to be. That moment changed everything. Grace's story teaches us that the final door we walk through isn't about rushing or striving. It's about stepping into the peace that comes from knowing you are chosen, seen, and deeply loved. The lesson here is to trust that what's been spoken in heaven will find its way to you in perfect time. So as you take this next step, whatever it may be, know that the door is open, your name is called, and the healing you've been waiting for is already flowing toward you. With an open heart and steady faith, walk forward into the new chapter waiting just beyond the threshold.